Hello guys, today we are going to cover the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. This work explores the principles of communism and critique capitalist society. This work, written in 1847 and published in 1848, Marx and Engels wrote this to explain the aims of communism, address the issues with the prevailing political and economic systems, and urge workers to take action. Main argument of this manifesto is all history is the history of class struggle, and this is evident in the transition from feudalism to capitalism. Chapter 1: Bourgeois and Proletarians. Who are bourgeois and proletariat? Bourgeois are the capitalists, owners of the means of production like factory, land, machines. The proletariat is the working class who sell their labor for wages. Rise of the bourgeois. Bourgeois, through industrialization, gained extra power and wealth, but by exploiting the proletariat. The bourgeois controls the means of production and in the process increases the alienation and exploitation of workers, who are paid less than the value of the goods they produce. Capitalism and contradictions. Marx and Engels argue that capitalism relies on exploitation because it produces more wealth than ever before, but it also concentrates wealth in fewer hands, leading to increasing inequality, hence results in alienation and discontent for the proletariat. Inevitable revolution. Marx and Engels believe that the contradictions of capitalism will eventually lead to its downfall. The proletariat, growing in numbers and awareness, will rise up against the bourgeois in a revolution that will overthrow the capitalist system and abolish the class structure.
Chapter 2: Proletarians and Communists. The first part of Chapter 2 answers a big question: what exactly do communists want? Marx and Engels say that communists are not separate from the working class. In fact, they represent the most aware, most determined section of the proletariat. Their role is to lead the working class towards revolution, not for their personal gain, but for the liberation of all workers. They don't just fight for the workers of one country, they fight for international solidarity, a global workers' revolution. Their ultimate goal is to abolish class distinctions and establish a society where the means of production, like land, factories, banks, are collectively owned. We can understand this by an example. Imagine a factory workers in India today. They often work long hours on minimal wages and have no say in the decisions that affect their lives. Now imagine a group of young leaders from among these workers who are most aware, they know labor laws, they understand how profits are distributed, and they start organizing the workers into unions, helping them demand fair wages, better working conditions, and a share in decision making. That's what Marx called communists. Not an elite class, but the conscious part of the working class that leads and unites the rest. Next is abolition of private property. Now we come to one of the most misunderstood and debated points, that communists want to abolish private property. But let us first understand what is private property according to Marx and Engels. Marx and Engels are referring specifically to private property in the means of production, the things used to produce wealth like factories, mines, and farmlands. The problem isn't owning something. The problem is when a few people own everything that generates income while the rest work for them without ownership or control. They argue that under capitalism, private property is used to exploit workers. The few grow richer not because of they work harder, but because they own more. Now let us understand the immediate goals of communists. Marx and Engels also mention specific changes that communists would push for immediately after the revolution. These are practical steps to dismantle capitalist exploitation and build a fairer society. First is abolition of property in land, which means land should belong to the people who work for it, not the one who owns it. Heavy progressive tax, income tax. The richer you are, the more tax you should pay. Abolition of inheritance rights, to stop wealth from staying in the hands of few families for generations. We can understand it with the example that if a billionaire passes on his wealth to its children, they have not worked for that wealth, and without any hard work they got that wealth. Next is centralization of credit in the hands of the state, so that the banks don't serve only the rich, they focus for the masses and the workers. Next is misunderstandings about communism. Marx and Engels respond to critics of communism. Many people say that communism wants to destroy individuality, family, culture, and freedom, but Marx says no. What communism aims to destroy is false freedom, the kind of freedom where a few are free to exploit the rest. Under capitalism, most people don't have real choices. You work to survive, not because you are free. Marx argues that real freedom will come only when people are free from economic exploitation, as economic means of production is the base of the society. He also says that communism doesn't destroy individuality, it allows it to flourish because people won't be limited by poverty, hunger, or joblessness.
Chapter 3: Socialist and Communist Literature. Critique of other movements. In this chapter, Marx and Engels critique other contemporary socialist and communist movements that they believe are inadequate or misguided. They distinguishes their own approach from other socialist doctrines. First one is reactionary socialism. Their ideas might appear to be socialist but contain elements of feudalism, capitalism, nationalism, or fascism or other characteristics of ruling class. Second one is conservative or bourgeois socialism. These are middle class reformers who want to soften the harshness of capitalism but still maintain its basic structure. They want better conditions for workers but do not aim to overthrow the capitalist system. Third one is critical utopian socialism. These socialists envision ideal utopian societies but fail to recognize the need for revolution. They are often criticized for being impractical and idealistic rather than materialist and revolutionary. Marx criticism of utopian socialism. Marx and Engels criticize utopian socialists like Robert Owen and Charles Fourier, who believe that communism could be achieved through the moral persuasion of capitalists or small scale reforms. They argue that such solutions are unrealistic because they fail to address the underlying material conditions of class struggle. The authors stress that only through revolutionary action can a real transformation of society take place.
Chapter 4: Position of Communist in relation to various existing opposition parties. Support for revolutionary movement. This chapter explains how communists align themselves with all revolutionary movements that aim to overthrow feudal or capitalist systems, even if those movements are not explicitly communist. Marx and Engels call for international solidarity among workers, as the revolution is seen as a global process. The chapter also stresses that communism is not confined to any single country, but it is a worldwide movement for the liberation of working class. The call for international revolution. Marx and Engels stress that working class has no national boundaries. The capitalist system is global, and so must the revolution be. The manifesto concludes with the famous line, "Workers of the world unite," urging the working class in all nations to join together in their common struggle against capitalism for a communist society. Key ideas in the manifesto. Materialist conception of history. Marx and Engels argue that material conditions of society, how things are produced, and who controls the means of production determine the social, political, and ideological structure of society. They reject idealist or moral explanations of history and instead emphasize economic forces. Historical progression of economic systems. According to Marx, society have evolved through different stages driven by changes in economic condition, from feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism. The revolution. Marx and Engels emphasize that the overthrow of the bourgeoisie by proletariat is inevitable. Capitalism contains inherent contradictions that will lead to its collapse, and the working class will lead a revolution to establish a classless society. End of class society. The ultimate goal is a stateless, classless society where the means of production are commonly owned. In this society, exploitation ends and everyone has access to the resources necessary for their well being, thus abolishing inequality and alienation. In summary, the Communist Manifesto is both a critique of capitalist society and a call to arms for the proletariat to rise up and overthrow the capitalist system. Marx and Engels argue that only through revolution can the class system be abolished and a new classless society established, where production is democratically controlled and wealth is equitably distributed. The manifesto is not just a theoretical text, it is a rallying cry for revolution.